It's Dr. Dan Burnham. And Dan has been a member of Central Baptist Church for how many years, Dan?
Since 1988.
Okay. And Dan spent a lot of time, many years working with SmithKline. And
GlaxoSmithKline.
Oh, GlaxoSmithKline. Yeah, I forgot the Glaxo. And he did a lot of studies, and he's got quite a mathematics background and statistics, and has good computer skills in manipulating data and running correlation coefficients, and he's been charting. We keep records of our solar panels output, and we do it monthly, and this has to do with earning solar renewable energy credits. And Dan has gone back over the 12 or 13 years of data now, and the output of the solar panels with the days, and to see how efficient the panels are and whether or not there's been any slippage. It used to be that solar panels would, the glass would start to frost up a bit, and that doesn't seem to be happening so far to our panels. So
yeah, actually, I'd like to know what your credits are per year. I don't know if you have that in a spreadsheet. Just what the dollar, well, I guess the kilowatt hours that we put back into the in net metering, what we put back into the grid.
So we only get the solar credits for the production of the solar panels. So we have to have a separate meter reading that output. We get one credit for every 1,000 kilowatt hours of output. So in a given year, it's between 11 and 12 credits that we get.
So it's a few thousand a year, or several thousand a year, dollars the church gets.
Yeah.
And this was all Chuck's idea.
So Dan, did you tell it? Can you start off by saying how you got interested in looking at PFAS?
Yeah, I really just came about. I'm a member of the Radnor Township Environmental Advisory Council. I joined in June, and so I became more of a perouser of the internet, and grew aware of these chemicals that are in our environment, as you'll see, that persist for a long time, and they've been associated with health effects. So I thought this was quite important because they're very pervasive. They're not like PCBs, which are still remain localized to the source of contamination. For example, the Hudson River's got a sediment loaded with PCBs from a plant somewhere upriver, but as long as you don't disturb the sediment, they're not, I don't think, that much of a problem, because New York gets its water supply from that watershed, that Hudson River watershed. So many of you may well know about PFS, and please add to what I'm talking about. I'm quite happy to share my slide deck with you. I can send them. I've just updated them tonight to Courtney, so as to share by email the slide deck, whoever's interested. Okay, I'm going to share my screen. You see the slide deck?
Yeah.
Slides, okay. Now,
You can read this if you move
And when
on.
I go to slideshow, that nice blue to green gradient disappears. So it's this kind of putrid green. I'm sorry about that. But
Is that new?
It's a nice color of grass.
well, thank you.
Yeah. Just do it.
Trying to get these helpful things out of the way, but they're not. I've just had to squirrel it up. Anyway, is the water safe to drink? PFAS stands for per and polyfluoroalkyl substances, and you'll see what they actually are. And this is a presentation on this that I gave to our ecology mission group that Central Baptist Church holds on Sunday afternoons. What really caught my attention was this WHYY article on the internet back in November. Philadelphia is suing 3M and DuPont over PFAS contamination. As you'll see, PFAS is everywhere in our aqueous environment, including in our rainfall. The lawsuit alleges that these chemical companies were negligent in the creation of PFAS and failed to warn the public about the dangers of the compounds. And the lawsuit lays out a widespread cover-up. Several other states and cities have also filed suits against these chemical companies for the contamination in their regions. 3M has decided to cease production of all PFAS chemicals by the end of 2025. So this is an example where I think the economic profitability of a contaminant is seriously limited by the threat or active lawsuits. An example is Roundup, which is a herbicide, I believe produced by DuPont or 3M. Does anyone know? But Roundup, you may have known for years, we sprayed up.
Monsanto.
Yeah. And now the production of that is being, I don't know if it's even on retail shelves. Because there's so many lawsuits, whether or not there's an award granted by the jury, it's just gotten too expensive for the company to keep fighting off many attacks. Now, the problem is it's been found in the past 20 years, especially past 15 years, that exposure to these chemicals is associated with adult kidney cancer and elevated cholesterol levels, decreases in infant birth weight, and decreased antibody response in vaccinated children. This response is particularly reproducible and sensitive to blood levels of PFAS in the mother at the time of birth and during nursing. There's less evidence for high blood pressure and preeclampsia in pregnant women and breast and testicular cancer, ulcerative colitis, and thyroid disease. And this is based on a review of the subject done about a year ago by the National Academy of Sciences. And there's the reference. So what are these things, PFAS chemicals? Well, it stands in this talk, perfluoroalkyl substances. So that means a chain of carbons that are coated with fluorine atoms. So here's an example here. Here the carbons are shown here. This is perfluorooctanoic sulfonic acid. So octo means 8 carbons, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 carbons. And you can see all these fluorine atoms attached to it, except for this sulfonic acid group on the end. Perfluorooctanoic acid is simply 8 carbons with a carboxyl acid. And then PFNA is 9 carbons, nanoic acid, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. And then the more recent ones that the chemical companies swear are safer because they get cleared from the body more fast is an example here is that hexanoic or 6 carbon sulfonic acid variety. What is desirable about these chemicals is they resist heat and oils and water. So you can imagine they're very stable. If you can resist heat, that has a lot of desirable qualities. For example, Teflon is really brand name for a PFAS chemical. I believe it's PFOA. I forget which. But we've used it for decades now, since the 60s, in our nonstick cookware. Stain repellent fabrics. You buy a fabric, often it's already stain repellent. It's coated with PFAS chemicals. And grease-proof food packaging. Takeout bags, for example. Popcorn bags, which I'm really sad to say, have this grease-proof PFAS lining inside for the oils to not penetrate the paper packaging while you're putting it in the microwave. And heat-stable firefighting foam, which we'll see further in a minute. And lubricants. As you imagine something that is resists heat and stable in heat and water, it can be an excellent lubricant for metal and machinery. Leases say they do not break down in the environment, and they can move through the soil and contaminate plants and drinking water. And in fact, as I'll show, they're actually present in rainwater. So due to perhaps steam being given off by industrial plants that contain PFAS, or other ways of suspension of the chemicals in the air, they enter into the water cycle and go up into the clouds and move across the globe, and then are returned to the earth in the form of rain. And they accumulate in the tissues and in the blood, so that the concentration in our bodies is roughly 1,000-fold higher in our blood than what is seen in our drinking water. And the half-life is 2 to 9 years. So for half of it to be removed from your body, it takes 2 to 9 years. So this stuff is quite a formidable thing to deal with. These are just, again, examples of what contains perfluoro and polyfluoroalkyl substances. Polyfluoro is just where the carbon, not all the carbons have a fluorine atom attached to them. So stain-proof carpets, carpet cleaning products, Scotch Guard. We use or have used food packaging, furnishings, cosmetics, apparently, outdoor gear, probably rain repellent outdoor gear, clothing, adhesive sealants, protective coatings. I used to spray my shoes with this water repellent stuff. Nonstick cookware, car seats. Anyone who cleans a car seat can understand why you'd want a stain repellent coating on it. And firefighting foam. And firefighting foam is the major source of contamination in terms of a localized source. We have air stations up in Willow Grove and other places of Montgomery and Bucks County that the water is highly contaminated with PFAS chemicals because they form a heat-stable aqueous film or bubbles, basically, that resist breakdown in presence of high temperatures and can smother a fire very effectively. So just our grandparents and great-grandparents didn't have these things that prevented staining. And, we seasoned our cast iron pots, and we oiled natural oil on our shoes, for example. So
Neat's
I
foot.
argue that these uses are not totally necessary. And I'm just going to go out there and say that this is an example of a market that is being created where there wasn't really a need in the first place. And so we could do without these conveniences and go back to what we dealt with before. And maybe I'm naive. If I had my grandmother with me, she'd think I'm crazy. But now, firefighting foam. This, I'd say, depending on how you feel about the military, you may have different opinion, but I would see this as a dramatic development in the ability to fight liquid gasoline fires, particularly. There was an accidental firing of a rocket on board. It ignited a store of aviation fuel, and there was a high rate of death and injury on the Forrestal back in 1967. And the naval gasoline firefighting practices were overhauled, and part of that was the development of this PFAS containing firefighting foam, particularly perfluorooctanoic acid and perfluorooctanoic sulfonic acid. So you could say that this is a necessary development. There's gas fires in the civilian realm as well. And since the development of this type of firefighting foam, there has been less effective, but still PFAS-based foams that are not, that have a faster clearance from the body. And we'll need to know still whether these different PFAS are safer for the body than the longer chain ones, that PFOA and PFOS. Now, I'm sorry about this. Presently, there are no federal drinking water standards for PFAS chemicals. So basically, other than the legal realm where manufacturer can get sued, as you saw on the first slide, for producing and dispensing PFAS chemicals in the marketplace, there's no federal enforceable limit to which people are exposed to these chemicals in drinking water. There are unenforceable health advisories, which EPA issued one in 2016 for PFOA and PFOS. That's 70 parts per trillion, either chemical singly or combined. But then since 2016, the health effects of these compounds has been demonstrated more convincingly. And now the EPA is about to have an enforceable limit this year, hopefully, of 0.004 parts per trillion PFOA and 0.02 parts per trillion PFOS, basically saying no level of these compounds in drinking water is safe. Because of the propensity to collect in the body, you cannot tolerate a And this is, in fact, these levels are so low, they're often below the level of detection for a lot of assays. I'm describing what PPT is down here, parts per trillion. It's equivalent to 1 drop in 1 trillion gallons. I mean, this is this is how potent these chemicals are. That at this level of concentration in our drinking water, we're concerned about health effects. It's a 1 PPT is also equivalent to 1 nanogram per liter. So we'll use that conversion in a later slide. So in this year, as I said, there will be hopefully from the EPA enforceable national drinking water regulation standards, where the EPA will propose to hold manufacturers, processors, users, and dischargers of PFAS responsible for limiting exposure. And this is my source here. The problem is this regulation may well be contested in Congress, and maybe even, I can't imagine it going to the Supreme Court, but it will be contested in Congress, and depending on which party is in power, it could be undercut. And this is where I think the legal realm is probably the most effective way to hold these manufacturers accountable, is to just continue suing them and make it unprofitable to continue making these things.
Hey, Dan.
Yeah.
Dan, I'm sorry, there's a question. And this goes just back to the conversation about Roundup. Is the herbicide glyphosate, which is in Roundup, one kind of PFAS?
I don't think so.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. If anybody knows the current state of Roundup, please let us know, because I keep using that as an example where repeated legal action, class lawsuits, and just multiple lawsuits have convinced these companies no longer to make the chemical. There are 13 states that now have legal enforceable maximum containment levels, or MCLs. New Jersey, as usual, is ahead of Pennsylvania, but they have very similar levels of exposure in drinking water. So you can see that these levels are a lot up, are above the levels recommended up here by the EPA of far less than 1 part per trillion. These are 14 and 18 parts per trillion in New Jersey and Pennsylvania. So if you add these two up, 14 plus 18, that means you cannot have a combined concentration of these two chemicals of 32 parts per trillion, which I'll show in a minute why that is important. As I mentioned before, there are air stations up in Montgomery and Bucks County, and particularly around Warminster and Horsham. And this is measurements of well data taken in 2020 by the Pennsylvania Department of Environmental Protection and the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, Agency for Toxic Substances and Disease Registry. And the measurements in these municipal wells closest to the air stations, which I believe are in gray, yes, are off the map. They're far greater than the 2016 EPA level for combined PFAS and PFOA levels. And surrounding these wells are private wells that may be less than 70 ppt, which at the time, 2016, it was acceptable to drink that water. But God knows what those actual levels are. They probably are not less than 1 ppt, which is the new FDA, EPA standard or health advisory. So these people are still being exposed, and there is something being done about it, which I will share on my later slide. If you live near these townships, Warrington, Warwick, Northampton, Moreland, Upper Dublin, etc., you could participate in a national trial to assess your PFAS blood levels and whether there are any health effects. So we'll talk about that in a second. Aqua PA provides water for Montgomery, Chester, Delaware County, and Bucks County. And I don't know where to put this thing. This company, this website, waterfacts.com, you can sign up to get the PFAS levels in the drinking water from various wells that supply counties in the neighboring area. And so I plotted over the past, 7 years, the PFAS levels of these wells. The Hatboro is very close to those air stations that I just showed you. And in fact, township well number 9, shown in pale yellow, whoops, I'm sorry, was showed very high levels back in 2016, and that were approaching the level of 70 ppt, which was the acceptable limit at that time. So they treated the water with granular activated carbon, which binds up organic substances, and they claim that they now have non-detected PFAS in their drinking water. The problem is, if you look at well number 8 in Hatboro Township, its drinking water levels bounce around, well, the Pennsylvania maximum contamination level for PFOA and PFOS combined, so that they're bouncing around 32 parts per trillion and exceeding it. I talked to a fellow at a technical expert at Aqua, and since 2020, they're establishing a target for their drinking water of 13 parts per trillion each for PFOA, PFNA, and PFOS. So that would be 26 if you combine PFOA and PFOS parts per trillion, which would be the limit. So that would be down here. So unfortunately, I didn't ask them. I didn't point out that their their well concentrations are still above their target of 26 parts per trillion, other than perhaps out in White Marsh, the green, and in recent years in Bucks County, sham water. So it looks like they have some work to do. Again, it's felt that no level in drinking water is acceptable. by the EPA based on review of clinical data.
Hey, Dan, I have two questions. Sorry to interrupt. Is there
Sure.
something important at the bottom of the slides that we're missing? Because we're not seeing, for example, on
Oh.
this slide, we're not seeing, it says, yeah, right. What's on the bottom of that slide?
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, yeah, I've got it. It says in 2020, aqua drinking water standard equals 13 parts per trillion each for PFOA, PFNA, and PFOS. If I
Thank you.
exceed
Thank you.
If-
Oh, there you go.
Yeah, maybe if I just show it like
Sure.
this, I won't show. Everyone can see it. Slideshow apparently is probably.
And then there was another.
Yeah.
Okay, so two other questions. Is the use of granulated carbon a possible use elsewhere? Also, then what happens to that carbon? How is it disposed of safely? That's from Brenda.
Very good question. And it's probably not disposed of safely. It's put in a landfill. Like, that's soup to nuts. That's where it goes. And you can imagine the amount of GAC that has to be used per year to clean the water. That's a lot. And it may be incinerated, which likely will destroy vast majority of the PFAS. But also it could end up in a landfill. We're already putting PFAS contaminated stuff in landfills, which or in the environment, which I'll talk about a little bit more. Let's see. So there was something called the National Health and Nutrition Examination Survey, which looked at the blood concentration or collected blood samples from across the country for measuring a wide variety of contaminants as well as metabolites in our blood. And I believe the collections were started at the beginning of the new millennium. And what they can do is just go back and analyze these samples for any new substances of concern. And this was done in this study by the National Academy of Sciences. And they showed over the past 20 years, up to 2018, that the blood concentration, fortunately, for a lot of these chemicals has decreased, particularly for PFOS, because it's been phased out. The manufacturer was discontinued around 2002. And so the blood level, given the fact that it's a half-life of 2 to 9 years, took a long time for it to fall, but fortunately its blood level has decreased significantly from around 30 on average for the average American sample to around 5 micrograms per liter or parts per billion. So this is 1,000-fold higher concentration than the levels of PFAS measured in drinking water. So you can see how the body concentrates these substances. And it's not just in fat, it's in organs and the kidneys and liver, lungs, and so may well contribute to the deleterious health effects. Over here is an example for perfluorooctanoic acid, the blood levels done for Montgomery and Bucks counties. Again, a lot of residents are exposed to drinking water that has elevated PFAS levels. And on average, their blood level back in 2018 was 3.1 parts per billion, whereas the national average was 1.4. So it's more than twice that of the general population. In Decatur, Alabama, manufacturing workers who are exposed to PFAS in the line of their work were showing terrible levels in 1998. The hope is that their levels are far lower. This is occupational exposure. So this just underscores that the body concentrates it, but also steps are being taken over the past 20 years to reduce our exposure to these chemicals. Now, I saw this publication just today. These substances are in rainwater. And as I said before, they probably get into rainwater, maybe largely from industrial sites, wherever water is energized and dispersed into the atmosphere through sprays or through steam, through smokestacks. And you can see over here, I'm sorry, the numbers are small, but here is the US EPA health advisory level of less than 1 part per trillion. And these are the concentrations of PFAS across the globe in rainwater collected in China. There were several studies done in China, the US, China again, Sweden, Malta, Portugal, and then some rural areas in Portugal, US, Sweden, Canada, US, Sweden again, and Antarctica and Tibet. The Tibetan Plateau even has measurable levels, although the range of concentrations is quite high. In the example of PFOA, the levels are well above the US EPA advisory level of less than 0.1 parts per trillion. So unfortunately, cleaning up our drinking water per se may not solve the problem if we are constantly getting rain dumping PFAS into our environment from some other part of the world. The orange is urban areas, green is rural areas, and the blue line is the water, drinking water, rainwater collected near a fluoropolymer plant in China. So we've got to realize when we make stuff, it just isn't going to stay where we want it to do work for us. It's going to get everywhere. So what can we do? Well, the FDA and other organizations has recommended us to change some of our lifestyles and what we bring into our homes. Try to limit or avoid packaged food with oil repellent coatings, popcorn bags, fast food containers, pet food bags, non-stick cookware, use cast stainless steel, glass or enamel. Things are some great grandparents used. Stain resistant clothing. I mean, I don't know in the first place what is stain resistant and what is not. Got to look at the fine print, I guess. or talk to the manufacturer when you buy something to see if it has something sprayed on it to make it stain resistant. Cosmetics, I don't know much about which particular cosmetics, but the PFAS has properties that make application of various things to the skin appealing. Paper straws, as you can imagine, make them waterproof. And unfortunately, wax dental floss, which I cannot stand a natural uncoated dental floss. So I gotta find uncoated nylon or silk dental floss or natural wax coated. Does anyone know where to get nylon or silk or natural wax coated dental floss?
I've seen it advertised. I can send around a site.
Okay, that'd be great. Fish from waterways impacted by PFAS. Now, certainly if you were to go, if you're a fisher person, you could go to this website and it would advise the water that you pull the fish from, whether it has elevated levels of PFAS. Anything from the ocean, Lord knows. I haven't seen any data on PFAS levels in seawater. I haven't looked for it, to be honest. But again, if fish have the same capacity to concentrate PFAS as the human body does, then we got to be careful with what we eat. I mean, we're already aware of mercury being concentrated in tuna. So here's another thing maybe to look at. For the older members here, this may not be as critical, but anyone with small children, grandchildren, children, I think it's really important that we actively reduce our exposure as best as we can. The main source of PFAS in exposing the body to PFAS is drinking water. And so you would all right away ask, well, what about bottled water? So I've looked up, there were 2 studies on bottled water, and I'll share those with you in a second. The first thing to do is probably have your water tested if you don't trust what WaterFacts tells you from Aqua. And there are various home tap water filtration systems, either point of use systems, the simplest of which is like a Brita filter, pitcher filter that has a filter in it, or a point of entry system, which is more complicated, where the main line going into your home goes through a filtration apparatus. So all the water coming out of faucets are treated. I'm going to talk about the point of use systems. There was one study I saw that the point of entry systems apparently do not work as well in extracting PFAS, maybe because the flow rate is so high. You have to give time for the PFAS to stick to the activated carbon and other matrices to be effective. In 2019, there was a discovery that PFAS was above 100 parts per trillion in bottled water sold throughout the Northeast due to contaminated spring water source in Massachusetts. And it prompted the International Bottled Water Association to set a standard of quality of less than 10 parts per trillion for total PFAS among 18 different types of PFAS, including PFOA, PFOS, and the hexane sulfonic acid variety. Consumer Reports in 2021 tested 47 bottled waters, 35 of which were non-carbonated, the rest were carbonated, and they tested them for 30 PFAS chemicals. And 2 out of 35 of the non-carbonated had PFAS levels greater than 1 part per trillion. Not terribly high values, but within what could be expected from treated tap water. And these were Deer Park and Tourmaline Spring. So these are non-carbonated waters. 7 out of 12 carbonated waters, the total PFAS was greater than 1 ppt, and ranged between 1 and almost 10 parts per trillion. So it was just below their standard of 10 parts per trillion. So unfortunately, if you really want to abide by the EPA standard of practically unmeasurable levels of PFAS in your drinking water, bottled water is not the way to go. Another study was done by Johns Hopkins in 2020, where they looked at 101 products, bottled water products across the country, including alkaline water, distilled water, purified, and spring water. And they analyzed for 32 PFAS chemicals, and the most prominent ones are listed here that were detected. And interestingly, the most prominent one was a propionic acid variety, just 3 carbons. So this could be either a breakdown product of the longer chain PFAS chemicals, or I don't know if it's one of the newer forms of PFAS, but it's understood that these will be cleared from the body faster, and the manufacturers say that the shorter chain PFAS are safer for you than the longer chain. But the jury is still out whether that in fact is true. The total concentration of the 32 PFAS measured in each of the 101 samples is shown here. 62 of the products out of 100 showed non-detected levels of PFAS. So this is at measures of nanogram per liter, or PPT. 13 of them were less than 0.5 PPT, which is good. That's approaching the EPA standard. 7 were 0.5 to 1, 1 to 2. PPT was found for 9 products. So that's above the EPA standard that's being proposed. And then the remaining ones were even higher, 2 of which showing 15 to 20 PPT total PFAS concentration. So once again, bottled water is not the way to go. Purified water, apparently the paper said significantly less PFAS than spring water products, but it avoided mentioning the brand names of the various products, the 101 products, unfortunately. So you couldn't see which of the purified water products were being tested and what their actual values were. So I still would not rely on purified water to be a safe haven from PFAS until you get the actual data for that product. You can test for PFAS in your tap water. It does cost money. It's about $80. Cyclopure is a very prominent company in this area. And it tests for 35 PFAS chemicals. And it tests down to single-digit parts per trillion using EPA-approved methods. And Cyclopure is a company that's funded by the National Institute of Environmental Health and Safety. So this is kind of a government
Oh my God, Jesus.
Government initiated company.
Hello?
Yeah, hi.
No, it's still going on. It's wrapping up. Fine.
You okay? You have a
Oh,
question or
sorry.
comment?
I got a phone call and
I don't know who.
my
oh,
apologies.
Okay.
Okay, that's all right. Happens all the time. I know some of this is dry, so if I get an emotional reaction from somebody, it'd be great. Other than just. Okay. Under the sink tap water filtration systems. So these are all commercially available systems that you can buy. And there was this publication that, published in 2020 that looked at these various commercial products. And the bottom line is that they were testing North Carolina tap water, which at the time showed very high levels. The total PFAS concentration combined for all the PFAS that they tested was over 16 ppt. So this is unacceptable level by any standard. So it really put these filtration systems to the test. They found that 5 activated carbon systems, shown diagrammatically over here, removed only 45 to 99% of the PFAS in this tap water. If they had a 2-stage system, that's with activated carbon and a sediment filter, it did a far better, removing 90 to 100%. Now, they couldn't explain why, but I would bet soup to nuts. One reason is the flow rate was a lot slower through here because you have this sediment pre-filter, which filters out large particulate matter, and it gives time for the post-filter, the activated carbon here, to bind organic substances. But the best performance was shown with 11 reverse osmosis systems that also have activated carbon and sediment filters. And they removed 90 to 100% to less than 5 nanograms per liter, or 0.5 ppt, as shown diagrammatically here. So what I'm going to do is talk about reverse osmosis systems for the home, primarily. This is just a diagram explain what reverse osmosis is. It's basically under high hydrostatic pressure, you're basically just forcing water through a semi-permeable membrane that allows the small water molecules to pass, but does not allow the larger substances like molecules like PFAS to go through the membrane. And so you end up with a brine over here of high concentrations of PFAS that unfortunately has to be washed away down your drain periodically so that you can keep using the reverse osmosis system. So you'd be drinking water over here on the right side, but you'd be once in a while flushing this contaminated water away to allow the membrane to continue filtering. So this is a 4-stage system that combines a sediment pre-filter, 2 activated carbon filters, an ion exchange filter, and a reverse osmosis filter from Aquasana, another big name in the industry. And it sells for about $500, but I saw a sale for $250. That was 2 months ago, so I don't know if it's still there. It's certified by the National Sanitation Foundation. It's certified to remove PFOA and PFOS less than the 2016 EPA health advisory level of 70 nanograms per liter, which again is not terrific, but at least it's certified, is shown to be a reliable system to reduce PFOA and PFOS.
Hey, Dan, I just wanted to let you know, so we've got 5 minutes.
Right.
And I'd love to have some time for some questions. So I think these solutions are really important. And somebody did ask, some of the products of fracking are being used to manufacture single-use water bottles. What type of plastic would that be?
Wow. Fracking products to use
Products of fracking. So Tim, can you ask your question? Tim Devaney said some of the products of fracking are being used to manufacture single-use water bottles. What type of plastic would that be? Do you know?
Yeah, am I on? Okay, I'm trying to unmute here. Can you hear me?
Yeah, hi.
Yeah, hi. Yeah, I've been following this for a number of years about fracking, and the new thing is, well, not new, but one of the uses they want to transport some of the products down to my area, Southeast PA, and export it for manufacturing plastic water bottles. So they're, we're using fracking, which is a problem in its own right, to make more water bottles, so this cycle is just getting worse and worse.
Yes.
But I'm wondering, what kind of plastic is that? Do you know what that would be? Or generally, what are these disposable water bottles? What kind of plastic is that?
Right, it's polyethylene, and I've heard that bottled water bottles leach out phthalates or plasticizers.
Yeah, that's what I heard. I was wondering what it is that's getting in the water. That's not the PFAS, though?
No.
Okay.
I don't know. I don't think so.
Okay.
PFAS are used for repellent properties or firefighting, not for containers per se.
Okay. Yeah,
okay.
Thanks a lot. Okay, I understood that from your
Yeah.
presentation. Okay.
Well, look, okay, these are just various products that you can buy for your home. I'll be sending these slides to Courtney, and Courtney, you can disseminate them to everybody. This is just something that you can replace your Brita filter with this filter at $45, and it says PFAS-free water in 20 minutes. Now, I don't know what that actually means, but again, it's developed by the National Institute of Environmental Health. And it's just something to consider if you have small children in your home to consider. Now, I just want to bring your attention to this study. PFAS multi-site health study. My battery ran low before. It's for people living in Bucks County and Montgomery County. Turn that off. you can enroll in the study, and for blood and urine samples, you can get your PFAS levels measured. And then they apparently do a neurobehavioral assessment of learning and memory, particularly in children and adolescents. There's still room for new patients, new subjects to enter. And here's the contact information down here. Okay.
Thanks.
Yeah. Any other questions?
I have one, and that is, I would imagine that animals, insects, all the creatures we live with in this world are also exposed to these chemicals, and probably it may play a role in some of the reduction in fertility and in the number of all kinds of creatures in this world that we have seen disappear.
Yes, yes. And they keep talking about, well, just human sperm count is decreasing. I don't know if it's an urban myth or an actual fact, but what's causing it? So yes, we really have to think about our decisions. Our church just finished a learning series on Karen Armstrong's Sacred Nature. And it talks about different faiths across the globe over the past thousands of years, Asian and Middle Eastern, and their attitude towards nature, and how they have man integrate himself into the natural world or not. And she presents a damning case, unfortunately, for the Judeo-Christian tradition of dominating nature and exploiting it, compared to the Asian religions of Confucianism, Hinduism, and Buddhism. And so I'm wondering, how can we show more foresight and less hubris in our technology?
Yeah, yeah. Does anybody have any last questions for Dan? Dan, this was an amazing presentation, and I'm excited to be able to send it out and share it with folks. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
It's good to have you back with us.
Well, yeah.
We've missed you.
Well, thank you. One thing I'm going to be working on for Radnor Township is the Inflation Reduction Act, how it will help low and middle income families electrify their homes and increase energy efficiency in their homes. We're going to have, it could be a mailing in everybody's tax bills next year, bringing their attention to the IRA, but also could be a public presentation of it. And I know there are some local experts on the Inflation Reduction Act, one of whom is Dennis Ray. Has anyone heard of him?
No.
Okay. So that's just something that I wonder if your group has talked about in the past or would be interested in learning more about.
We have not talked about that. Yeah.
Okay. The middle income goes up to about $120,000 per household, which for a retired couple maybe within the range of a lot of people, as well as families. So it might be relevant not only to people of low income, but also to some people who are living or on the mainline IPL.
Right, yeah. All right, well, Chuck, did somebody want to say something? I want to thank Dan for his good work and research on this. And it's a little depressing, I have to say.
Yeah, sorry.
No, that's okay. So thank you for bringing this to our attention. Thank you all for being here. We're going to have a couple more meetings through May, and then maybe work on a different format through PAIPL for the fall.
Okay.
Yeah, so I'm excited about that. Are there any questions? I will share the chat, and there were Katie Ruth asked me to share 3 things that are in the chat. You can see at the very beginning, submit public comments to the EPA asking Administrator Reagan to take seriously the advice of his Scientists Advisory Board to increase standards for soot pollution in our communities. And then there's a soot congregation toolkit. And then, are you a faith leader? Sign our faith leader letter.
Okay.
Okay.
I wonder, is there a way to paste these into a?
I will. So I will send you the chat too.
Yes,
And you can copy them, Dan, I think.
you
Yeah,
can.
you can. Yeah, I mean, you can cut and paste them, but I'll send you the chat along with your slides.
All right. Thank you.
Okay.
So,
You'll send it out to others? You'll send it out to all of us?
So Arthur, are you on my, did you get an email from me last night about this?
Yeah, well, I got an email from
PAIPL?
Yeah.
So this is different. Can you type would you mind just sharing your email, and that way I can get this to you?
Sure.
That'd be great. If you can just put it in the chat. You can share it with everyone, or you can just share it with me, and then I'll see that you get this material.
Oh yeah, there's some real helpful chats about Gore-Tex rainwear and try Grove Company for sustainable products.
Grove, yeah, Grove.
Oh, yeah.
They might have the floss. I've seen some silk dental floss somewhere.
Okay.
And I had no idea that the coated dental floss was not good. Ugh.
Yeah, me neither. They do sell something at Shift in Narberth. And I was like, why would I do that? But now I'm going to go back and get some.
Yeah.
So,
Thank
yeah.
you, Arthur. Thank you very much.
Mhm.
All right, friends. Thank
Okay,
you.
guys.
Thank you for everything. Have a great.
Thank you. Yep. I'll send those slides to you right now, Courtney.
Okay, Dan, thanks. Have a great
Yep.
rest of your February.